Venezuela wasn't liberated, it was taken. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. What I'm about to tell you today is not a rumor, it is not speculation, and it is certainly not an accident. On January the 3rd, the world woke up to a geopolitical earthquake and most people didn't even realize what they were witnessing. In a move that stunned observers across the globe, the United States carried out a direct act of aggression against a sovereign nation in its own backyard, Venezuela. Not sanctions, not rhetoric, not diplomatic pressure. This time, it went much further. The president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife were abducted, taken, removed. U.S. aircraft flew freely over Caracas. Helicopters hovered above the capital. Strikes were conducted. And here's the most chilling part of all. Not a single shot was fired in defense of Venezuela's president. No air defenses engaged. No resistance. No meaningful response. Which raises an uncomfortable but unavoidable question. Who opened the doors from the inside? Because this operation did not happen in a vacuum. It required coordination. It required silence. And it required complicity. From the videos circulating online, it was clear that the United States enjoyed complete air superiority over Caracas. Venezuelan air defense systems that were supposed to protect national sovereignty simply did not activate. That alone should tell you this was not chaos. This was orchestration, and the motives behind it are neither hidden nor new. Let's get one thing straight immediately. This was not about human rights, it was not about freedom, and it was certainly not about democracy. We've heard that script before. Iraq, Libya, Syria, every time the justification sounds noble, every time the result is catastrophe. Look at Libya. Before NATO intervened and removed Muammar Gaddafi, Libya was one of the most prosperous countries in Africa. Today, it is a failed state. Open-air slave markets, militias, endless violence. Regime change does not bring democracy, it brings collapse, and Venezuela is now walking straight into that same abyss. If you want to understand what just happened, you have to understand one number, 300 billion barrels. That is the estimated size of Venezuela's proven oil reserves, the largest on Earth. Not Saudi Arabia, not Russia, Venezuela. In today's money, that oil is worth approximately $17 trillion, more than the GDP of Japan, Germany, or India, and that is why Venezuela was targeted. Not tomorrow's oil, not next year's oil, but oil as power, oil as leverage, oil as a strategic weapon. President Trump himself said it openly. The United States, he declared, would run Venezuela with major American oil companies moving in to rebuild and control the country's energy sector. Those companies, of course, are the same corporations that bankroll political campaigns and shape U.S. foreign policy behind closed doors. This is not a conspiracy theory, it's public policy. Colonization, updated for the 21st century. Let's call this what it really is. Colonization, not with flags and governors, but with contracts, corporations, and controlled governments. Earlier, the United States moved aggressively into Guyana, another oil-rich nation on Venezuela's border. Now, with Venezuela effectively under U.S. influence, Washington is overseeing more than half of the world's known crude oil reserves. That gives it unprecedented economic and political leverage. And this is where the story becomes far more dangerous, not just for Latin America, but for the entire world. This is a geopolitical reset. What we are witnessing is not a one-off event. This is a revival of imperial logic, modernized for a multipolar world. After Venezuela, the targets are obvious: Nicaragua, Cuba, and beyond Latin America, Iran. Regime change has become a permanent tool of U.S. foreign policy. The objective is simple: install obedient governments, sell off national assets, align foreign policy with Washington regardless of what the population wants. And Venezuela is the blueprint. Why the U.S. doesn't even need Venezuelan oil. Here's the irony most people miss. The United States does not need Venezuelan oil for domestic consumption. America already produces over 13 million barrels per day. It imports massive amounts of heavy crude from Canada, nearly 4 million barrels per day. Meanwhile, Venezuela currently produces less than 1 million barrels per day due to years of underinvestment and sanctions. So why take Venezuela? Because this is not about shortages. It is about control. Control over supply. Control over pricing. Control over rivals. With enough investment, tens of billions of dollars, U.S. corporations can rebuild Venezuela's oil infrastructure and integrate it into a Washington-controlled energy system. Add Guyana to the equation, and suddenly the US can influence up to 40% of global oil reserves. That level of control does not need to be exercised daily to be effective. The threat alone is enough. Oil can be flooded into markets to crash prices, or withheld to drive them up. Prices can be used to punish adversaries, to discipline allies, to destabilize competitors. This has been done before. In the mid-1980s, the Reagan administration worked with Saudi Arabia to flood the oil market, crushing prices and delivering a devastating blow to the Soviet economy. That playbook was never forgotten. Venezuela gives Washington a 21st century version of that same weapon. For Russia, this is a nightmare scenario. Moscow has invested billions of dollars in Venezuela's oil sector. It holds outstanding debt. It has long-term strategic interests tied to Venezuelan production. US control means lost investments, lost leverage, and exposure to oil price manipulation that could directly target Russia's economy. Heavy crude is where Russia has traditionally been strong, and Venezuela sits right at the heart of that segment. And for China faces a different but equally serious threat. Washington could simply block Venezuelan oil exports to China, forcing Beijing to scramble for alternatives, likely deepening dependence on Russia, or even more strategically, the US could sell Venezuelan oil to China at a discount, undercutting Russian exports and reshaping global energy alliances. Either way, Venezuela becomes a pressure point in the US-China rivalry. Let me ask you a simple question. Has Africa benefited from centuries of Western resource extraction? The answer is obvious. The colonial model is always the same. Export raw materials cheaply, import finished goods expensively, trap nations in perpetual dependency. Venezuela is now being pulled into that same cycle. Its people will watch their wealth extracted, their sovereignty erased, their future decided elsewhere. What happened in Venezuela is not the end of a story. It is the beginning of a new phase in global geopolitics. Energy is power, oil is leverage, and Venezuela was the missing piece. This is not about Maduro, it is not about elections, it is about who controls the world's energy, and who gets to decide the future. If you found this analysis valuable, please hit the like button, it helps the channel more than you think. Subscribe if you want in-depth, no-nonsense geopolitical analysis that you won't hear on mainstream media. And most importantly, leave a comment below. Do you think this marks the return of open imperialism? Or is this just the new normal? As always, thank you for watching. Thank you to every supporter, every subscriber, and every paid member who keeps this channel alive. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, stay informed.